My name is David Merrill. I'm a senior organizer with the Sierra Club, working on climate and energy here in Missoula. And I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight, especially on a rainy night. Looking forward to a good conversation about elections and climate change and energy, all the really interesting stuff that we're thinking about more and more these days. So let's dive in. The moderator is Sky Borden from Environment Montana, and she will introduce the panelists, and we'll get started. Thanks for coming.
All right, first off, everybody do a round of applause for Dave. David Merrill has done all of the hard work to get this together. We've got a really good lineup of panelists tonight. I'm going to just do some brief introductions, and then we'll get straight into the questions. I've been researching you guys. Hopefully I got it right. Paul Haber is a professor at the University of Montana in the Political Science Department. He's taught and written extensively on globalization, environmental politics, and social movements. In Latin America, too, but that seemed slightly less relevant. I wasn't sure. Next is Daniel Carlino. He is a current environmental studies student at the University of Montana. He's doing an internship with the Sierra Club right now, and he's worked with a lot of different environmental nonprofits while he's been a student here. I also found out this week that he's a distant relative of mine, proving all stereotypes about Southerners true. Dave Ditloff has the longest title on the panel. He is the Director of Conservation Partnerships for the National Wildlife Federation, Northern Rockies, Prairies, and Pacific Regional Office. Is that right? Dave has a master's degree in public administration from UM, and in his career he's worked for the Montana Wildlife Federation, the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, Five Valleys Land Trust, and the Elk Foundation. Next we have Abby Huseth. She is the coordinator for the Missoula-based group Faith and Climate Action Montana, which helps faith communities get engaged around climate and environmental issues. She's also the energy program coordinator for Climate Smart Missoula, and she is a new mom to one of the cutest babies in town, Soren. It's true. Last is Martin Kitston. He is the founding and current editor of the Missoula Current. He's a Marine Corps veteran who served in the first Gulf War. He's also a UM graduate, and he worked for 17 years for Lee Enterprises at papers in Montana and Wyoming before launching the Current in 2015. So thanks for being here, guys. So we're going to dive right into it. The first question we have for the panel tonight, and I'm going to just get each one of you to answer it, is when did the gravity of the climate crisis first hit you? I'm going to start with you, Paul, the professor.
Okay. I don't remember, but one thing that really hit me is I read this book that maybe some of you read called 2052. Anybody read that book? Okay, it was a book that was authored by a group of people, including a guy named Jurgen Randers, who was one of the authors of, you read it? Yeah, one of the authors of the Club of Rome book, Limits to Growth. And they issued this book in 2012. And like the Club of Rome, or like the Limits to Growth book that had been written 40 years ago, it was this synthesis, and they did this model of where they thought things were going to go in the future, right? So hence the title of the book, 2052. And there's a lot of but the book really hit me. There's a ton of takeaways from its big fat thing. And one of the takeaways was that their prediction was that we weren't really going to get serious about climate change until the negative effects and costs of climate change became evident. And then based on the science at that point, they were predicting that that would probably be in the 2030s when we really started to kick it in. So there would be some, anticipatory kinds of things that happen. There would be some progressive places that were doing things more than other places, and we can see that within the United States, right? In some towns and some states, things are going on. California is a pretty interesting place. We'll probably talk a bit more about California during the evening. But that one hit me, and that's a fairly depressing thought, right? I mean, that we're not going to really do things until the 2030s, but I think there might be something to it, frankly.
I'd say the gravity of climate change hit me a little late. Growing up in Georgia, public school system didn't talk too much about climate change to me. In fact, we heard a little bit about it, but really nothing about how humans are causing the issue. And I really heard nothing about the solutions until really a couple years ago. Talked about the issues. Ever since I've lived in Georgia, we've been in a drought and caused by climate change, but we would just focus on the problem. Nobody would talk about the causes of it in school. And then also at home, both my parents aren't believing that humans are causing climate change, so I'm not hearing it at school or at home. So I would say the gravity of it really hit me kind of late, and knowing like what I could do about it hit me pretty late. I'd say first, my first environmental studies class here at the university was Nature and Society, and it was all about humans' interaction with nature and how we've been affecting and working together, and that was really an eye-opener for me to see the causes of the issue, and then really leading to helping me figure out the solutions. And it really seems like a very solvable problem, and I've gotten very optimistic since the gravity of it first hit me. But yeah, I'd say it really didn't hit me until I was 19 years old here at the university.
I guess I'll tell more of a personal story is what kind of triggered me. I'd actually been working on climate change policy for a year or two for the National Wildlife Federation. And I knew all the statistics. I knew, the policies at that time. There was the Feingold-McCain Act, I think, is what it was. It was actually, we were thinking national, congressional policy. But I don't think it really sunk in until one day I took my two daughters, they were probably 9 and 10 at the time, and we went to Bullhead Lake, deep in the Mini Glacier Valley in Glacier National Park. This is literally this lake right underneath the switchbacks of the Continental Divide, and it was hot. It had to have been close to 100 degrees in the middle of Glacier National Park near the Continental Divide. And we did a little bit of fishing and caught a few fish, but what we noticed here is the animals were acting differently. We watched the biggest, fattest bull moose, and it didn't move from the middle of the lake. Even people would come and visit, it just sat there because it needed to be in cold water. It was heat stressed, and it didn't have a choice. We had 2 white-tailed deer literally come down right next to us and take a drink, irregardless of that there were people there. Yes, it's a national park. They're a little bit more amenable to people being around. But things were different. Things were odd, and it actually made it kind of an exciting day. You get to watch a bull moose for 3 hours while you're fishing. That's pretty cool. Then we hiked back out. Sweaty. The kids were a little bit grumpy by that time. It's a fairly flat hike, but when they're 9 and 10, they're going to grump anyway if they're more than a mile back. And we started coming down Highway 89, towards Browning, and we're going up, Divide Pass, and we see out in the distance, way deep in the valley, underneath just a little wisp of smoke, and sure enough, that blew up. And if you know where, like just south of St. Mary, in between Divide Mountain, that whole valley, from the head of it all the way out, there's not a live tree. There wasn't a live tree that came out of it. It basically closed the east side of the park, at least that, the central east side of the park, for weeks after that. And I think that's when it really hit, like something weird was going on. And it wasn't something in the future, it was now. It kind of galvanized, my work on the subject.
Hi, everybody. I guess I'm going to kind of give a cop-out and say that my kind of conversion to understanding the climate crisis, given that I have done some work with faith communities, I'll use a bad analogy, but I don't have a born-again story. I feel like my conversion took time. I grew up in California, and it kind of grew up with a kind of default urban environmentalism that was... Actually, I'm surprised looking back that not a lot of these things were discussed or learned about in school. But I can think of several kind of moments in the last few years, really, that helped me understand really where we're at. Let's see what I was going to say. The first thing, the summer I moved to Missoula, it was summer of 2014, and I lived right in the university apartments right by Mount Sentinel. And the thick smoke that summer, that was the first time I remember looking out my window and not being able to see the mountain about 25 yards away from my front door. And that was extreme. I had never personally experienced an impact quite like that before. Another experience I had the opportunity to go to Paris and to participate in the COP21 climate change conference there in 2015, and not as part of the official conference, but as part of kind of a parallel conference organized by activists. I went to a really fascinating event that was called the People's Trial of Exxon, and it was organized by Bill McKibben and Naomi Klein and a bunch of big names. But the most powerful thing was they had people from all over the world, from the Marshall Islands to a Sami woman from Norway, people telling their stories. A man who lived in the Delta in Nigeria and talked about the impacts of oil refining on his family there, and all these stories kind of, I saw the personal side of it for the first time, in addition to my own minor experiences. And the 2016 election was a big one. I think we knew it was bad, but until the 2016 election, I think those of us who work in this area maybe didn't feel quite the same sense of the Herculean task we had ahead of us until then. I think that's probably enough for me for now. Thanks.
Hey, so to me, this question kind of boils down to when you realize the sky was blue. And I'd like to say you kind of woke up one day just knowing that it was blue, and you woke up one day realizing or just knowing that climate change was a reality. But when I think back in time, I think back as hard as I can, as long as I can. And I guess climate change wasn't always a part of my perspective. And growing up, I can't remember climate change really ever being something that was mentioned by family, by the news, by the newspapers, really anything, anywhere. Growing up in Denver, the brown cloud that hung over the city was just a given. That was just the way things were in a big urban city. I guess it wasn't until around 2006 when An Inconvenient Truth came out that climate change was put on my radar. Not that I necessarily believed it or even knew what it was, but I started paying more attention to it. More specifically, there was a book that came out on repeat photography in Glacier National Park that was photographs taken, I'm guessing, around 1910 by a photographer whose name I can't think of, but it had all these great vistas, these beautiful scenes of the park, these big glaciers on the peaks. And then a crew from the University of Montana or MSU or some college or team went out. They went to the same vantage point. They took those same photographs, and those glaciers were pretty much gone in some cases. In other cases, they were greatly diminished. And I think that book, more than anything, kind of opened my eyes that, things are real. And my life is really one based on observations. I'm not the smartest guy up here. So I do good listening. I do good watching. And, I don't remember orange forests growing up. I don't remember rain in December. There was a point up 15, 20 years ago when Montana, Helena, and Missoula, they had sub-zero temperatures before Halloween. I can't remember the last time I've seen that happen since then. You can't ski on Marshall Mountain anymore. When I was in college back in 1995, you can go up here 20 minutes up the road and go skiing on Marshall Mountain. It had enough snow on it where you could actually ski it. That snow's gone. Good luck getting any snow on that peak whatsoever anytime during the entire winter. So it's just a collection of observations that makes me believe that I've always believed in climate change, because now I can't possibly doubt it. It's everywhere.